Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Mitchell, VP of Products here at OPSWAT, and today we're going to be talking about public sector email security, and specifically why layered resilience matters more than ever. Whether you're in federal, state, or local government, healthcare or education, or indeed any public sector function, email remains one of the most persistent and dangerous attack surfaces that you can manage. And the landscape has changed quickly. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. Here's the fundamental challenge that we're going to be talking about. The controls that most organizations built for their email security strategy simply weren't designed for the threat environment that we're working in at the moment. AI-generated phishing, sophisticated malware, embedded in everyday file types, zero-day exploits that bypass signature-based detection. These aren't hypothetical future threats. They're happening right now, and they're bypassing traditional email security at an alarming rate. The question really isn't whether these attacks are getting through. The data tells us that they clearly are. The question is, what can you do about it? This slide is important because it puts in context the stakes for the public sector specifically. So think about some of the sectors that are listed here: government, health, emergency services, water, nuclear. These aren't just industries, there are services that people depend on every single day. A problem to emergency services, for example, isn't just an IT problem, it becomes a public safety problem. A breach in healthcare isn't just a compliance issue, as important as that is, it's a patient safety issue. One email, one malicious attachment, or one convincing phishing email link in an attachment can trigger a chain of events that disrupts essential services for for days, weeks, or even longer. And in the public sector, that impact is felt directly by citizens. This is why we say email is no longer just an IT concern. It's become an operational resilience concern that all public sector organizations need to take account of. Let's share some data points that really drive this point home. As you can see, 22% of breaches in 2025 involved credential abuse. That's where somebody's login has been compromised, and attackers have used that to get into the organization, potentially to get even further than the original compromise, and compromise additional lateral systems. 60% of attackers, 60% of successful attacks, technology is, people are still going to remain a key variable in this process. And here's a stat that really should get your attention. In December 2025, there was a 14-time surge in AI-generated phishing attacks. AI is making it dramatically easier to craft convincing, targeted phishing emails at scale. And the volume is only going to increase as AI tools become part of everyday life. A couple of other things to think about that you can see on this slide. The average global cost of a successful data breach by attackers now sits at 4.4 million. Even for a large business, that's a substantial amount of money. And 70% of malicious PDFs, a file type that your employees open without a second thought every day, contain QR codes that lead to phishing websites. And perhaps really important and most telling of all, from the data that we get from Microsoft Defender, over 70% of all malicious emails are actually removed by Defender after they've been delivered. That data comes from November 25 to January 26. That means that those messages reach the inbox first before being subsequently removed. That's a significant window of exposure for your employees. This is the central shift that we're talking about today. Email security is no longer a filtering issue, it is a resilience issue, because the goal isn't just to catch threats, it's to ensure that even when something gets through your organization can still keep running. So why isn't detection alone enough? Let's look at that in a little bit more detail. Attackers have figured out which file types users open without thinking twice. PDFs, Word documents, spreadsheets, the files that we use every day. These are now the new malware envelope. And because signature-based scanning looks for known threats, a novel or slightly modified payload often sails right through those layers of protection. Microsoft built-in defenses, though good, and which many organizations rely on as their primary or sole protection, as we talked about, leave a window of vulnerability. We just saw the data there. Threats are still reaching inboxes and are being removed after delivery. That's just too late in the current threat environment. And then, of course, there's also ransomware. The vast majority of ransomware starts with an email. If you don't stop the payload before it executes, you're not dealing with a security incident. At that point, you're actually dealing with a recovery operation. And recovery is expensive, disruptive, and in the public sector can often be very, very public and expensive. As we heard earlier, 4 million for a single breach. That can easily exceed an organization's entire email security investment for the year. That's the cost that makes the case for in-depth protection. So let's look at a few concrete examples just from last year. So let's start with Marks and Spencer. They're a large UK-based high street retailer. A third-party vendor of theirs was compromised through an attachment-based phishing attack, and the ripple effect caused weeks of disruption, particularly to their online business, with a final cost of £131 million. That's around $169 million. So from a single incident, that's nearly $170 million of cost to recover. We also saw disruption at multiple airports across Europe last year when Collins Aerospace VMU's platform was compromised. Air travel was disrupted for days, and the attack left exposed infrastructure vulnerable to further exploitation. Furthermore, this incident was very public, with long queues at airports, disrupted travel plans. Here in Berlin, where I'm talking to you from today, this incident caused significant problems at Germany's capital city airport, and that was a feature of the news coverage for days. And in a different sector, Harvard was targeted through a combination of phishing, that's voice phishing, and a targeted phishing email. The result was the leak of 1.2 million alumni records, 1.2 million trusted records now out potentially on the dark web. So, three very different sectors: aircraft, air travel, retail, and academia. But in every case, the common thread was social engineering and an attachment, and the consequences were significant and lasting disruption. These are not edge cases, and we will undoubtedly see more, but they are illustrations of the current reality. So how do we get ahead of this problem? A significant component of the response is having a multi-layered approach to protection. I want to spend a few minutes on this concept because layered security can sometimes sound a little bit abstract. The reason we talk about layers is because no single control is sufficient against the breadth of today's threat landscape. The best way to think about this, if one layer misses something, the next layer can catch it. So for example, if a threat gets past your anti-phishing filter, your attachment sanitization still neutralizes that payload, rendering a safe file for a user to use. If a file bypasses one antivirus engine, it gets scanned by dozens more. That's the real power of layered defense from OPSWAT. And critically, this multi-layered approach needs to address AI-generated threats today as well, because we've established those are accelerating rapidly, and they're particularly effective at evading traditional controls. So this is our goal: email security products, and I think this is especially pertinent to the public sector. First of all, we want to reduce exposure. Minimize the attack surface so there's less for adversaries to exploit. Then we want to limit the impact. When something does happen or gets missed, as it does sometimes, how can you contain that before it cascades into a larger incident? And more than anything else, helping you to keep services running, because your mission is to serve citizens, and that mission can't be interrupted. Not just at email, but everything we build at OPSWAT is oriented around these three outcomes. MetaDefender email security is purpose-built for this challenge, and it differentiates itself in a few key ways. Our flexible deployment model means we support on-premises, air-gapped, and cloud environments. For many public sector organizations, particularly in defense, intelligence, or regulated utilities, air-gapped deployment isn't an optional choice. It is a way of life. We're one of the very few vendors that can fully support that environment. Very importantly, we operate inline, which means threats are neutralized before they ever reach the inbox. We're not removing threats after delivery. we're stopping them before they get a chance to reach end users. That closes the window of vulnerability that post-delivery detection leaves open. Underpinning all of this is deep file security. This is where we go well beyond what you'll find in most email security solutions. We combine multi-scanning across 30 plus antivirus engines, deep CDR technology to sanitize files by removing potentially malicious content and reconstructing clean versions, sandboxing to safely detonate suspicious files, and AI-powered malware detection. Together, these capabilities address the weaponized files that can slip by conventional scanning. Looking more closely now at our two solutions, we offer two deployment models, and the right choice depends on your environment and requirements. MetaDefender Email Gateway Security is a full-featured on-premise solution. It handles both inbound and outbound email, gives you granular email sorting and filtering controls, alongside AI-based anti-phishing and anti-spam protection with a 99.98% detection rate. URL protection at both arrival and time of click is provided, and spoofing detection and email authentication via SPF, DKIM, and DMARC are also a part of the package. We also support for encrypted attachments, including password protected files. You can actually have us hold password protected files, challenge end users for their password for that file, and then safely decrypt those files so that they can properly be scanned before they're sent on to end users, thus eliminating that important gap where many conventional email security solutions can't actually see inside those encrypted attachments. We also offer DLP capability in email gateway security, supporting over 125 attachments, and our sandbox runs 20 times faster than traditional tools, with 25,000 analysis being conducted every day. And of course, email sanitization through deep CDR supports over 220 attachment types, with multi-scanning bringing those 30 plus antivirus engines and a 99.2% detection rate. MetaDefender Cloud Email Security is designed for organizations that are already running Microsoft 365. It integrates directly with your M365 environment, extending your existing Microsoft controls with OPSWAT's deep file inspection capabilities, including CDR and sandboxing, and as well multi-scanning. It's a fast path to stronger protection for cloud-first organizations. So I want to say a few words now about how we've been developing the products in 2026. And I'm highlighting a few features here that are particularly relevant for public sector use cases. Self-service recipient quarantine gives end users more control and reduces burden on stressed IT teams that have better things to do than sorting through quarantined email. That allows end users to be able to manage their own quarantine. DLP tags, data loss prevention tags in email previews, help highlight problematic content in emails to administrators at a glance. And on the email gateway, we now process full .eml files through the sandbox, which means you can get a comprehensive analysis of complete email, not just attachments. We've also added the ability to preview HTML and plain text email bodies in quarantine, enhanced malware scan verdicts to add more information, and given administrators the ability to download potentially malicious email components so that they can investigate those further in a secure environment. On the cloud email security side, we've introduced per custom routing for per integration that allows customers with more complex multi-domain environments to customize deployments to their own specific requirements. Signed and encrypted email flags in the events list are now highlighted to allow swift identification alongside improved file scan detail for all files. We've also made it easier to customize scanning process to your environment now, with policies allowing customers to set any policy based on any combination of sender or recipient. So that's what we've already delivered this year so far. Let's talk for a second about where we're headed on the gateway side and what some of our strategic priorities are. On the email gateway, we're pursuing ANSI certification in Q3. That's the security standard of the French Cybersecurity Agency for our on-premise solution. This will give us an externally validated security assessment of the product, which is especially important in high security public sector organizations. This is in addition to our company-wide ISO 9001 certification that applies to all of our products. For our cloud email products, we also have ISO 20001 certification together with a SOC 2 evaluation. On the gateway, we'll also be expanding the platform that our email gateway supports, adding a Linux form factor to complement our Windows support, giving organizations running Linux-based organizations the flexibility that they need. Turning to the cloud now, we're adding adaptive link protection. This gives dynamic URL scanning with contextual risk scoring. This goes well beyond simple block lists to evaluate links based on behavior and context, reducing exposure to weaponized links that may not have been flagged at time of delivery. We'll also allow retroactive mailbox scans, the ability to scan existing mailboxes and identify threats that may have arrived before your security controls were in place. It's particularly valuable for organizations that are migrating to OPSWAT or tightening their security posture. And if you feel that you may have let some malicious emails through, you will be able to run a scan at any point to test that within your email solution. Finally, customers will benefit from proactive DLP with content inspection and data loss prevention built directly into email flows. This helps ensure sensitive data doesn't leave your organization via email, whether that's through accident or potentially through intent. But of course, email security doesn't exist in isolation. It's just one part of a broader security architecture, and OPSWAT's Meta Defender platform is designed to address the full threat service. Whether threats are coming through files, emails, endpoints, peripheral media, or the cloud or web channels, and whether they're targeting user endpoints, applications, storage, or partner organizations, the Meta Defender platform provides integrated protection. Platform includes Meta Defender Core, Meta Defender Email Security, Storage Security, Managed File Transfer, and more, all backed by core technologies including deep CDR, adaptive sandboxing, AI-driven threat intelligence, and proactive DLP technology. And critically, as with email, it's available where appropriate on-premise, in air-gapped environments, and in the cloud. So whatever your deployment constraints are, we'll be able to meet you there. I want to leave you with a few words from organizations that are currently already using OPSWAT to protect their email environment. As you can see from the quotes here from some of our customers, these organizations span banking, critical infrastructure, and enterprise technology. But the common thread is the confidence that comes from knowing their email security is doing what it's supposed to do. As you can see, customers are gaining clear business benefit from adding OPSWAT CDR, multiscanning, and sandbox technologies to augment their existing protections. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope the session has given you a clearer picture of why we feel that the email security landscape has shifted and what a modern layered approach looks like in practice. If you'd like to explore how Meta Defender email security could work in your specific environment, you can visit the website to get started at opswat.com, or you can scan the QR code on your screen to access our email security guide with more detailed information. We're also happy to set up a demo or a more in-depth conversation with your team. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you once again for your time, and I wish you a pleasant day.